France's former president Nicolas Sarkozy has arrived at a prison in Paris to start serving a 5-year jail term. The 70-year-old leader arrived at La Santé Prison in a police car on Tuesday morning, becoming the first former head of state or head of an European Union state to be jailed. Sarkozy was sentenced to 5 years after being found guilty last month of criminal conspiracy due to having accepted millions of euros in illegal payments from the late Libyan ruler Muammar Gaddafi to fund his 2007 election campaign. He has always denied the charges. His lawyers said as he arrives to start his sentence that a request for release had been immediately filed. Dozens of supporters and family members had stood outside Sarkozy's home from early Tuesday, some holding up framed portraits. Now for this conversation, I am joined now by an international journalist, Adeni Kunu, as well as global policy analyst, Tabeyang Echu. Good to have you gentlemen here. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Mr. Kunu, let's start with you. From your perspective, what does Nicolas Sarkozy's jailing say about transparency and accountability in political campaign financing? Not just in France, but let's talk about across democracies.
I think that it's indicative of one thing, that nobody is above the law. And without a doubt, the French government has been able to demonstrate that nobody can escape if you contravene whatever it is that is a laid down rule for you to actually either finance your campaign or for you to actually allow judicial processes to go through. And let's remind ourselves that the key issue that has brought about some other tentacles resulting in his conviction was that the money came from Gaddafi in Libya. Up until Gaddafi's death, Gaddafi never allowed many countries across the world to have access to many of the natural resources that it has. And do not also forget that this same man that has been accused was the person that was used to ensure that Gaddafi was ousted from power. So people who are actually students of history must understand that the same man that will be going to jail happened to be the pivotal character before Gaddafi left office. But as far as that funding is concerned, I have to say that it's a two-pronged approach. If you look at Sarkozy going to jail now, yes, he's been accused and convicted, though it will be appealed, but there are also other things that he found out that he was trying at some point to actually make a mess of judicial process by bribing somebody for information. We know that people go all about to get certain information in certain ways, but that being said, but let me also say this. The majority of the funds being used by even the French government comes from Africa. If you look at what is happening in our West African neighboring countries here, it is simply because at the moment those countries have blocked every access that France used to have to their funds. And if you also look at Cameroon, so you find that on one side, it's a lesson to the global community that nobody is above the law. But it's also a lesson that opens our eyes to the realization that there's a lot of hypocrisy within government, and there's a lot of things that happen that if you look to, yes, please.
So Mr. Kunu, you're saying practically that there is on one side rule of law, and then there's on another side political persecution. So is that what you're clearly saying?
Absolutely, absolutely. I must tell you that. If we took away Jacques Chirac, the former leader of France, said, France is nothing without Africa. Even as we speak, as I'm speaking with you today, 2025, majority of the Francophone countries have their foreign reserve compulsorily domiciled in the French bank account. And if there's any profit made from their foreign reserve, France has to approve how much they can withdraw. In addition to that, the French government has the right of refusal if, for instance, anything is found in Côte d'Ivoire today as a mineral resource. It has to be that France refuses to buy before Côte d'Ivoire is permitted to sell to any other country. So to me, that is not different from what they are doing to Nicolas Sarkozy.
Okay.
It is simply because the French government is unhappy that they never had access to the mineral resources of Libya, but one man was able to get campaign fund from the same person. So it's hypocrisy on the one hand and rule of law on the other. Yes, please.
All right, then. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kuni. Let's move now to Mr. Echi, who's been waiting for us on the wings. Mr. Echi, thank you very much for waiting. But I'd like to find out from you what you think this means for public trust when it comes to the people of France. And what does this send to the rest of the world, the rest democracies or the other democracies across the world?
I think it is significant, even though it's coming a little bit too late, and it's just a slap in the wrist. It's really something that he should go to jail for a long time. Unfortunately, he's going to go in there, they're going to appeal, and in a couple of months, they might get him out. But it is significant, to say the least. I think the last French president that went to jail was, I think, during the First World War, that was Marshal Pétain. To really have this level of judicial accountability and the independence of the judiciary in France is significant. But on the bigger frame of things, like what the other analyst is saying, the evil that the French have done to the African continent, not only in West Africa, the Central African region is still completely under the complete domination of the French. So if we begin to hold some of these their leaders, not only past leaders, even the current ones, it would send a very powerful message to the people that there can still be justice even though it's delayed.
So what lessons do you think countries like Nigeria and other developing democracies can draw from this, from the way France is handling the Sarkozy case?
I do hope that, given that we are still young democracies, but they should copy from the judicial independence. Because the problem with most of these African countries is the way the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature are all intertwined. And it is very difficult for anything to happen when the president sits as the person at the top of the judiciary or controls some of the minions within that whole arm of government. So they need to be independent, and people should respect the decisions of the judiciary when holding people accountable.
Okay.
But unfortunately, the system of patronage and clientelism that we have in the continent, it really needs us to do better, for us to see what others are doing, not to copy or just plagiarize what they're doing, but customize and contextualize it based on our own realities.
So, Mr. Echu, a former president going to jail for 5 years, this is unprecedented. And I'm wondering if you see this case serving as a paradigm shift when it comes to the way financing campaigns is looked at across democracies. Do you see this changing the way laws are formed or the mechanism of political funding?
I don't think so. For those of us here in the US, you could see that even in advanced democracies, if care is not taken, the people with the money actually run the world. To run for Congress here is a lot of money. To run for president, you're spending billions. Where's this money coming from? From sources that you cannot put your hands on. And in the continent, you have a lot of shadowy influence from the diaspora, from untoward elements with arrangement of shady deals. And you have China now also swooping in with no stringent rules as far as corruption is concerned. So I think even though it's significant, I don't think that is really something major. I might come to think of it. It was in 2012, and it's almost 14 years down the road that he's been brought to account. A lot of people have actually forgotten. If you don't have knowledgeable people with historical records to actually tell you that this is what he did to Libya, and when Gaddafi started asking back for the money, he conspired with the American and some of their colleagues in Europe to get him killed.
Mr. Kuna, let me come to you and ask you. So you've heard Mr. Echu here. They say it doesn't matter. But what about you? Do you think this is an exception, or would it serve as a model?
Well, I think it can serve as a model, and it could be seen as an exception depending on the context with which you're operating from. It's an exception because since the Second World War, which obviously is like over 70 years ago, nobody that has served as leader of France has ever gone to jail. But it's also a model because we have a lot of despots on the African continent, people who have been accused of having done something that they should not have done, but they're still walking free. We found situations where certain leaders have been actually accused and certain allegations have been taken to court. In Nigeria, for instance, a former lawmaker of the Federal Republic of Nigeria was caught to have collected monies that were marked by the security services of the country, yet the person has been granted pardon, despite all the hard work done to actually get to that. So when you see a ridicule, in my candid estimation, of certain judicial efforts that have been made, then it calls to question the kind of independence we want. My other guests there said something significant. There's a way that respective arms of government are very intertwined in our part of the country, where you find out that instead of standing firm and standing tall on what the individual arm of government should do, many of them are cohering, they are collaborating. The only time that Nigeria has a semblance of a judiciary that was, independent, I'm just putting it in context now, of the executive, was 2 times. First, when President Olusegun Obasanjo was there against the House of Reps leader, and when Bukola Sarkozy was there, and how he repeatedly stood his ground against some things that would have been done in excesses by the president. So I'm saying that for many of us on the continent of Africa who are privileged to be speaking from the diaspora, it is key for those of us pressing out to ensure that we emphasize on models that will ensure there's independence of the arm of government and that can scrutinize the books of the president. For instance, President Muhammad Buhari did lots of things.
Mr.
God bless his soul, is no more. But the point is, we can do a retroactive, investigation of certain things, even if we cannot send the dead man to jail, but we can look at the things he didn't do right, so that we can actually pivot ourselves better for the coming interventions that government must do. Yes, it's a model and it's an exception. Yes, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kunu. Thank you very much, Mr. Echu. I wish I could have this conversation continuously, but unfortunately, we have used up the allotted time for it. Thank you, gentlemen.